Hello and welcome back to Internalize, the podcast which has nothing of value and no real characteristics to it. I don't know what I am saying, but I'm going to speak and I like speaking. And that's what Internalize is for. I want this to get into the weeds about something today. Uh, that's about introducing technology into life, I suppose. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but introducing tech into places where tech isn't usually there. Uh, well, okay. I think before that, it's important to have some sort of introduction. First up, uh, I think if you've listened to last week's podcast or if you read last week's blog, I feel like the blog is probably better for people with shorter attention spans, which is sort of ironic. But anyway, that's yeah. You'll know that I have a sort of obsession with doing things uh with tech, like introducing tech into places where it's not really generally introduced, where I mean it is, I suppose it is introduced, but it's not introduced very often outside the sort of uh I guess productivity YouTuber sphere. But anyway, I I think I've been really into the idea of introducing tech into things, in search of a better word, into workflows. And I've been trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. Like, how do I tell someone? Because this is a dilemma I've had, right? It's how do I tell one of my friends who's not a tech head how to, well, why they should have a to-do list or a calendar, for example. And even if I'm able to convince them about that, how do I tell them what calendar they should use? Whether they should use a physical one or an online one, or Google Calendar or Outlook or whatever other calendar people use nowadays. Or same thing for to-do lists. Like, I know I use Microsoft To Do, but does that mean everyone should use Microsoft To Do? No, of course not. That's definitely not the case. And the question is, how do you choose what is right for you? How do you figure out how to integrate something into your life well, sort of such that it doesn't get the word I like to use is friction. It shouldn't have such high friction so that it sort of becomes a burden. Technology shouldn't be a burden, and if it's a burden, there's something wrong with the way you're using it. And there's nothing wrong with using something the wrong way. Honestly, it's really unintuitive how to use technology properly. And honestly, I have also used it super inefficiently, and just for the sake of it, being technological, I've been all, you know I guess I've been not very good about it in the past, and I think I've tried to work on it, and I've now gotten to a stage where I think I know what I'm doing in terms of using technology to make my life more productive and more I guess productive sort of has a bad connotation. I guess I don't want to glorify a sort of hustle culture. I think that's really unhealthy, at least beyond a point. I guess you sort of do have to hustle if you're in 12th and you have your exams in a week and you haven't studied. But it's just for the you shouldn't. Anyway, I digress. Hustle culture isn't exactly as great as people make it out to be. But anyway, I mean, by productivity, I mean intentionality, rather. I think technology should help you be more intentional with your life, and it should help take out the sort of useless elements of your life, right? Like every day, a lot of time, at least this is what I've noticed when I was in the ninth and 10th grade, for example, a lot of time of my day just went in not knowing what to do. I would come back from school and I would say, okay, well, I have homework to do, but I don't know what homework I have to do. And I don't know if I've gotten the books to do the homework. So, what do I do about it? I just, think really hard. Perhaps I look in my diary because I used to write homework still. But what if, how do I know I have written it in my diary and I've not actually forgotten a day's homework? I've forgotten to write it. So anyway, so such problems had perked up for me, and that's what really made me decide to go into the direction of automation and quote unquote productivity. Basically, what I have noticed, what I have felt has really helped about moving into the sort of tech heavy, tech first workflow is the fact that, again, as I said, the sort of dumb parts of my life, or um, the sort of work, I mean, the sort of things you need to do that's really just a waste of time, like, thinking about what you're supposed to do today, like do that day. That is effectively a waste of time if you truly think about it. If it should, ideally be obvious, right? And anyway, so what I found out was that using technology sort of helps eliminate those issues, the issues that come with, repeated tasks that require remembering, I suppose is the best way to put it. Like if I have to, pay my bills every month at on the 29th. The 29th I'll know this on the 1st or the 2nd, and 29th rolls around, and I don't even notice that it's 29th. Or on the 29th, I'm like, oh, it's 29th. Maybe I have one thing to do today. I can't remember. And now I am, in credit card debt. So, anyway, that's irrelevant. But I think I've digressed quite a lot, and that was very unnecessary. Back to the point at hand, though. Uh, Technology, as I said, should enhance your life. It should take away the useless parts of your life and not add to the sort of burden that comes with using it. It shouldn't be a burden to use it. Ideally, it should be zero burden, and that's what I've actually referred to in my blog. I've said ideally tech should fade into the background. It should be zero burden. But of course, if you're really not familiar with tech, you can really never have zero burden. But it should be minimal. It shouldn't. It should interfere with your life less than it improves it. And again, this is a very personal topic, so figuring out how you actually do it is really not that simple. But I think I've sort of come up with at least some idea or some plan of action, at least, to get started with that. And yeah, I guess that's what I want to talk about today. First of all, it's pretty important. I mean, at least in my opinion, there are three main sort of principles, or sort of like North Stars, I suppose, I follow while thinking of introducing uh, tech into my life. First of all, is reliability. It's pretty obvious, right? I guess it sort of lines up with the fact that it shouldn't be a burden. Reliable tech is not a burden. If you have, you know, let's say you have a home server, for example, and you set it up so that every night at 12 p.m., 12 a.m., midnight, you the server connects to your computer and it does a backup, right? I mean, of course, you do stuff so that it doesn't just unnecessarily store hundreds and hundreds of copies, but you have, let's say, the last 5 days worth of stuff on your home server, last 5 days worth of data from your computer on your home server. Now, let's say the computer crashes and your Windows environment is nuked or something, right? Now, what do you do about it? You can't really do much if you don't have this backup. But now that you have this backup, this reliable backup, you don't you can just restore it, right? You're not worried about the fact that maybe the backup isn't the correct backup, or the backup isn't hasn't been didn't happen that the particular day that it was supposed to. I mean, let's say this happened on a Saturday. Let's say you should ideally not be worried about the backup not happening on Friday, because it's reliable to the extent that it always happens. So that's how technology should be. It should work when you need it to, and more importantly, it should work. Uh, it shouldn't stop working when you need it to. I think if it works when you need it to, you you start taking it for granted, which is actually quite a good sign. I think if you start taking the stuff you use for granted, it means that it's reliable. And anyway, more on that later. I'll talk about how I figure out whether an app is reliable or not a bit later, but that's a teaser, I suppose. But yeah, uh, as I said, reliability very important. It shouldn't break when you need it the most. That is how I think I'll summarize it. Um, I think figuring out how something is reliable is really not that simple. Actually, before that, I want to confess that I'm going to talk about this in terms of just purely the sort of uh, cliche productivity YouTuber side of using tech. Understand that it's not the only way you can use tech in your life. I'm just doing this for a because I know I've done a lot of research about it, so I know quite a lot about it, and b just for simplicity's sake. So yeah. Anyway, back to the point at hand. Reliability. Um, what I would consider a reliable app. Let's take a to-do list for example. I consider Microsoft To Do, which is my app of choice, to be super reliable. Because I can let's say I have a task that comes to my mind, and I'm using my computer. I can just open up To Do, add it to my computer, and add whatever I need to it, due dates, reminders, and stuff. And I will know that even if I put a reminder for the next day morning, and even if my computer is locked, I'll get a notification on my phone. And I know the cross-platform sync works all the time. I've never had a case when it doesn't work. So I guess at that point, it's sort of the fact that it exists sort of ceases to exist. You know what I mean? It's like the fact that you are using a to-do list stops mattering because the to-do list becomes a part of your life. You're not intentionally shoehorning it into your workflow. It just is your workflow, right? And that's what reliable apps are really good at. They're good at just doing what you need it to, and they're good at making you trust them. There's a reason that data centers have redundant power supplies and stuff, because you need to trust it. Anyway, I don't know what I'm getting at. I went on a bit of a tirade. I don't know if tirade is the right word, but I went on a tangent. But anyway, trustworthiness. If you trust an app, it's reliable. Anyway, so figuring out how an app is reliable, not the easiest thing in the world, to be honest. I guess an easy way is to go, read reviews, watch articles. Maybe better to go on forums like Reddit, although Reddit is sort of killing itself bit by bit. Go to places that have communities that use the app you want to use. In my case, let's say Microsoft To Do, there's a Reddit for it, I suppose. Actually, let me check if there's a Reddit for it. Oh, there is, but I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how popular it is, but it exists. Anyway, you can go there and see what the public consensus is about it, and then you could sort of make your judgment about whether it is reliable or not. Um, on top of that, a maybe more valid, a more trustworthy method of doing this is just doing it yourself, right? You could just download the app yourself. Most of these apps that I mentioned are free, although the paid ones, maybe free trial you could use. You could pull it up yourself, try using it for a bit, and see what if you've found any glaring flaws, reliability issues, something doesn't work when it's supposed to. And I guess you have that personal experience to sort of to fall back on, and that will really help you understand whether something actually is as good as people say it is, or it actually does what is advertised. Unfortunately, it's quite a time consuming process, especially if you want to compare more than one piece of software. But I think it's worth a shot if you're really sort of into the idea of getting the app that is the most uh, perfect for you. I guess it's a personal decision. Honestly, you could just trust forums as well, and you may get similar results as well. It's all in the end, it's just a personal decision. Secondly, I think into simplicity is my second value or belief, or what do you say, principle. That's the word. Uh, Simplicity is a really big principle that I follow when it comes to introducing tech into our lives. Complexity adds burden. It's just as simple as that. If something is complex to use, you will not want to use it because the amount of effort that you need to use it is a lot higher than the amount of reward you get. Simple apps, on the other hand, make it so that using it is really easy. So it's not really much of a lift to actually start using it, which is a big uh, contributor to how often you use an app. If something is simple and there's no real downside to using it in terms of, time consumption or whatever, you'll use it more. It's just as simple as that. uh Simplicity, again, it shouldn't be difficult to navigate and store. Although I think there is sort of what do you call it, there's a gray area here. There are some apps like Notion, for example, that have a pretty steep learning curve, and I don't think that should stop you from using Notion. I actually use Notion myself, but you should realize that the sort of simplicity is absent in favor of power. Often simplicity is sort of inversely relationship has an inverse relationship with the functions you have. So if you're willing to give up the functions for simplicity or vice versa, that's fine. Also, if you if you just get used to the software, it gets automatically simple, right? If you're sort of if you're past that initial learning curve and it becomes sort of second nature to use the app, then the burdenness sort of falls apart, and I mean falls away, and it becomes a lot more. It becomes much less of a hassle, and I guess that simplicity point doesn't hold. But again, depends on the task you're trying to do, right? For if you just want to take notes on books you're reading, maybe you don't need something as powerful as Obsidian. Or maybe you do. Maybe you like making the connections between books that Obsidian allows you to do. It's 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 a personal thing. It depends on what you value. More on that later, by the way. And lastly, I think the last key principle I'd like to follow, or I do follow, is intuitiveness. Everything should be intuitive. It shouldn't. I think this is a sort of extension of the last point, but I think it's important enough for me to decide to say it separately. Intuitiveness should, as I said, basically it should be easy to use. That's the long and short of it. While simplicity and complexity also refers to the app you're using, the layout of the app, and the how things are stored in the app, whether you know whether it uses proprietary formats, or if it doesn't have cross-platform sync, how do you use it? Basically, it's the sort of extra stuff. Intuitiveness just talks about the user experience. If it's intuitive, it is easy to use, and you will use it more because, again, friction is lesser. Intuitive apps often fade into the background. And again, as I said with Microsoft To Do in my example, it sort of becomes second nature to use an intuitive app. That's not necessarily the case with unintuitive apps. Often, if an app is really unintuitive or really complex or unnecessarily complex, I'd say. Complex apps aren't necessarily bad, but unnecessarily complex apps really are. If an app is unnecessarily complex, for example, it just becomes a burden to use it, and you'll just use it less. And again, because of that, the reliability of your system falls. It's all interlinked, right? You have an intuitive app that stores data simply. Like everything is simple in the app and it is easy to use. That means you'll use it more. You'll both input data into the app more because it's easier to open it up and use it, and you'll also take out data from it more because it's easier to find what you're looking for. And because of that, you become more reliant on the app or more trustworthy of the app. And because of that, your system becomes a lot more reliable. And a reliable system is what we should all seek after. Anyway, so that's the three main principles I look for in introducing tech into my life. That is intuitiveness, simplicity, and reliability. Now, once you have figured out some apps, I suppose, to introduce into your lives, it's sort of important to think of how you should use it as well. It doesn't make sense to just have the app and have no real idea about how you're going to use it, and just you know like you have Google Keep now, and you don't know how are you going to use Google Keep in your workflow. Well, I'm just going to note stuff down on it. How are you going to note stuff down on it? You should have a clear idea of how you intend on using the app and how it solves some certain problems you have, right? In the same boat, the way you decide to use an app should be based on reducing friction as much as possible. it should, as I said, be as easy as possible to open up the app and use it, right? Whether that's adding a widget of the app to your homepage, or connecting it to your voice assistant, or maybe even connecting, I don't know, creating code that connects it to your calendar or other, that takes a transcript of your Zoom meeting and creates tasks and stuff. I don't know. It depends on the kind of person you are, the extent to which you want to do this. But you can kind of go all you want. At some point, though, the friction is low enough for you to start consistently using it. Once you've reached that point, you're sort of chilling. Uh, there are some key principles I look at again in terms of reducing friction, or rather, some features that I look for in apps that help me reduce friction. First off, quick. It should be quick. It should be fast. It should be reliable. If like Google Keep, for example, which is the notes app I use to basically brain dump. If I get an idea, open up Google Keep, throw it in there, and get out. Right? That's great at that job because it opens up super quickly. It saves it. You can type on it without any lag whatsoever. It's really easy to add a note. There's no loading time, and the sync is perfect. It just works all the time, and it's so again that's reduced friction for me. Whenever I get an idea, I open my phone, click the plus app on my on my Google Keep widget, type it, just escape, and I know it's going to be there on my computer, on my phone, on keep.google.com, everywhere I look, right? Next up, intuitiveness. Again, let's take the Google Keep example. It's super intuitive the way I use it, right? You could, I mean, use it for reminders and tasks and all that kind of stuff, but I just add notes. You could put everything in a single note, which is what I used to do. But now I've just found it easier to just hit the plus button on my widget and type. That's just super intuitive, super easy to use. And that's really improved the way I use Google Keep. Similarly, you should think about how you intend on using the app in the most intuitive way possible. It should be sort of it should make logical sense how you're using the app. Next up, automation. This is quite a nice to have feature, I suppose. It's not really a necessity, but if you have, if you use a Kindle a lot, for example, maybe there are apps that automate the transfer of your Kindle notes to Notion or whatever. That is, that's great. That's very useful, and that's very, very nice in reducing friction. Basically, at that point, there's zero friction, right? So again, great feature. Cross-platform support. This I think is almost a necessity. What you use should be available on every app every platform you're on. This means you're not limited to when you can use the app. Like Microsoft To Do, for example. If it was limited to Windows, I would only be able to use it when I'm on my computer. But I get tasks all the time when I only have my phone with me, when I don't even have my phone and I have my iPad. That kind of thing, right? If it's there everywhere, then you're chilling. That means you'll use it more. Again, lower friction, better, more reliable. AI tools, probably a newer feature. I guess it can. I guess natural language processing makes it so that you can just type or say stuff, say what you want, and it'll do it for you. Which is again quite a new feature and not really something I have played around with very much. But again, something worth looking into if you intend on going down that route. Lastly, interface. Again, simple interface. You don't really have to think about where things are. It's just all very straightforward, and in that sense, even the structuring. Let's say if you have a file system on File Explorer or Finder or whatever map like if you use a Mac or Windows, if it's structured well, you don't need to know exactly where it is, or you don't need to use the extremely slow search function. You can just open up the apps because it's all intuitively set up. That's why interface is so important. So lastly, figuring out how what apps will fulfill your requirements is also pretty important. There are some what do you say, there are three main questions I want you to look towards, or what I like looking towards. First up, what platforms are you on? If you're an Apple guy through and through, you have some options, but if you use multiple operating systems, the number of options you have sort of drops pretty dramatically, actually. Next up is what function do you want it to do? Some apps are, specialists at certain functions, and they may be good at that one thing specifically. You should try to think about where the technology will fit in your workflow and what part of the workflow it will enhance. You should always think about the enhancement part of it. And thirdly, do you prioritize simplicity of function? Let's say you have a timetable app, right? You want to create a timetable. You could use Google Calendar or you could use Excel. Excel is the easier idea. I mean, it's really simple to use Excel, but Google Calendar is more, you have more functions, you have notifications, and you have color coding and stuff. And you have visual representation, you have a widget. So it's quite a fine line between function and simplicity. And that line, again, deciding where you lie on it, completely personal decision. So, yeah, that's all. I suppose that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope this was pretty, insightful to at least some of you. I think, this is quite a different kind of podcast to what I usually do. It's a lot less, based off my blog. I think it was more off the cuff, but I hope it was informative. I hope it was fun, and thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow, subscribe. I don't know what platform you're listening to this on, but thank you so much, and I will catch you next week. Goodbye.